The moment the world seemed to stop happened just 1 minute ago. Literally, 1 minute ago. King Charles, the man who has been quietly steering the monarchy through storm after storm, stepped into the press room with an air of finality that none of the reporters could ignore. You could feel it even through the screens of the millions of people watching live around the globe. Something monumental was about to unfold. And then, in a voice that carried authority, history, and an unmistakable hint of exasperation, he delivered words that would change the trajectory of the British royal family forever. He issued an ultimatum to his own son: full royal reinstatement or total separation. Harry now faces a choice that could redefine loyalty, family bonds, and the very image of monarchy in the 21st century. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Can you even imagine the weight of that moment? One man, a father, a king, holding the future of his family in a single sentence, while the rest of the world waits with bated breath to see what will happen next. It's the kind of scenario that usually belongs in history books or dramatized films. But this is real life, unfolding live. And yet, almost nobody outside the palace walls truly understands the layers of tension, betrayal, and political stakes that are now playing out behind the closed doors of Buckingham Palace. For years, Harry and Meghan have walked a tightrope between royal duty and personal freedom, between public expectations and private ambition. They've been criticized, celebrated, scrutinized, and analyzed to the point that every gesture, every word, every appearance has been dissected endlessly by the media and the public. And now, all of that comes to a head in this single, unthinkable moment. What could Harry possibly do? Does he return fully into the royal fold, surrendering some part of his independence for the sake of tradition and family? Or does he walk away entirely, breaking not just ties with the crown, but with centuries of expectations, privileges, and responsibilities? This isn't just a family disagreement. This is history in the making. Think about it. How often does a monarch publicly issue a choice that could make or break a prince's future? There are layers of complexity here that most people can't even begin to grasp. On one hand, the royal image, always carefully curated, meticulously preserved, is at stake. On the other hand, the human elements, the emotions, the loyalty, the grudges, the whispered secrets, are tearing through the family like wildfire. And the world is watching. Every headline, every tweet, every global news feed is capturing reactions ranging from shock to disbelief, from glee to sympathy. The palace, as we all know, is never just a residence. It's a theater of history, a place where centuries of decisions have been made, some quietly, some explosively, each with consequences that ripple across generations. Imagine the corridors of Buckingham, the hushed whispers among advisors, the tense glances between aides and staff, all converging on a single decision. And at the center of it stands Harry, caught between his father's expectations and his own desires, knowing that no matter what choice he makes, someone will be disappointed, if not furious. And then there's Meghan. The Duchess has been a polarizing figure from the start, criticized, defended, idolized, demonized. Now, her role in this moment is pivotal. What is she thinking? How does she feel? What strategies might she be whispering into Harry's ear as he contemplates the impossible choice presented to him by his father? You can bet there are conversations happening right now that will never make it to the tabloids, at least not in full. Messages between palace aides, private phone calls, and strategic discussions behind velvet curtains are shaping what could either become reconciliation or a total rupture of the monarchy. If you think this is just drama for the tabloids, think again. This is about legacy, power, and identity. Harry's choice isn't just personal. It's political, symbolic, and potentially catastrophic for the public image of the royal family. Monarchs have always wielded influence in private as much as in public, and King Charles is demonstrating both the weight of his authority and the subtle art of psychological pressure. For Harry, this isn't just about whether he wants to attend royal events or wear a uniform. It's about aligning with centuries of duty or stepping away from it entirely, knowing that the world is watching, judging, and documenting every single moment. And let's pause for a second and really consider the stakes. If Harry chooses full reinstatement, he returns to the royal fold, but at what cost? Personal freedom might be restricted. Media scrutiny would escalate again, perhaps more intense than ever. Family dynamics could remain tense and complicated. Every move would be analyzed, dissected, and criticized, as if he were stepping back into a gilded cage with the public and press as omnipresent jailers. On the flip side, choosing separation could mean freedom, but also isolation. Breaking away could create rifts that last generations, fuel endless media speculation, and ignite new controversies that could make previous scandals seem minor by comparison. It's worth noting that this isn't just a father-son dynamic. It's a father-monarch versus son-prince scenario. Charles has spent decades building his image as a ruler, navigating centuries-old traditions, and managing expectations both within the family and in the public eye. Issuing this ultimatum is not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It's a calculated move, designed to pressure Harry into a choice that benefits the monarchy, maintains appearances, and asserts Charles's authority. But the emotional complexity cannot be understated. A king can wield power, yes, but he cannot fully control love, loyalty, resentment, or personal ambition. And that tension between royal duty and personal will is the heart of this unfolding drama. Meanwhile, the public is reacting in real time. Social media platforms are exploding. Hashtags are trending. News outlets are scrambling to report every angle, every reaction, every potential consequence. But here's the thing. What the public sees is only the tip of the iceberg. There are palace aides whispering in corridors, leaked messages circulating in private chats, advisors drafting contingency plans for every possible outcome. The tension inside the palace is, without exaggeration, palpable. And it all revolves around one question. What will Harry do? Consider the irony. Harry, who once sought distance from the royal machine, now faces a choice that could either cement his place within it or sever ties entirely. And the timing, just as he and Meghan were attempting to carve out a new life away from royal expectations, is what makes this story explosive. The world expects intrigue from politicians, scandal from celebrities, but when the monarchy itself is at the epicenter of a crisis like this, the stakes feel both ancient and immediate, like history and the present moment colliding in a single, breathless instant. Now imagine being Harry for a moment. Every choice feels monumental. Every decision will be scrutinized not just by the family, but by the entire world. Every reaction could be interpreted as a statement of loyalty or rebellion. Can you even fathom the pressure? And yet, even in this intense spotlight, Harry is human, complex, conflicted, and navigating a path that no one alive has walked before. The Duke of Sussex is no stranger to headlines, but this is different. This is personal, political, and historically significant all at once. And here's a question for you. If it were your father, your family, your duty at stake, what would you do? How do you weigh personal freedom against centuries of expectation? How do you choose loyalty when every option comes with sacrifice? This is the dilemma that Harry now faces, and it is the dilemma that will dominate the headlines, discussions, and historical records for years to come. But what makes this moment truly electrifying is not just the choice itself. It's the uncertainty of the aftermath. Will this ultimatum spark reconciliation, or will it ignite a fracture that reshapes the royal family forever? Will Meghan stand firmly by Harry's side, or will her influence, presence, and decisions add a new layer of complexity? How will advisors, palace staff, and the public respond once the decision is revealed? And most importantly, how will history remember this day, the day King Charles demanded an answer from his son, in front of a world that couldn't look away? And yet, despite all of this buildup, there's one final, haunting thought that lingers. The story is far from over. In fact, what just happened might only be the beginning. Because in the shadows of Buckingham Palace, plans are being hatched, alliances are shifting, and whispers that could become headlines are already circulating. And what comes next? What decisions, what confrontations, what revelations lie ahead? They will shake the palace, the monarchy, and the world. The day began like any other at Buckingham Palace, or so it seemed. The sun glinted off the golden gates, the guards marched in perfect precision, and the tourists outside smiled, cameras ready, oblivious to the storm about to break inside. But behind the grand facade, A tension unlike anything the palace had seen in years was building. The halls were unusually quiet, as if the ancient walls themselves sensed the gravity of what was about to occur. And then, without warning, King Charles stepped into the press briefing room with a presence that immediately silenced the murmuring journalists. You could feel the air shift, almost taste the tension. Something monumental was about to happen. From the very first second, it was clear that this was no ordinary statement. Charles, composed but firm, delivered words that immediately sent shockwaves through the room, and, in minutes, across the world. He issued a choice to his son, Prince Harry. Full royal reinstatement or total separation. No middle ground. No room for negotiation. The clarity and finality of his statement left everyone, journalists, palace staff, even senior aides, staggered. One could almost hear the collective intake of breath from London to Los Angeles as the words sank in. Imagine what that must have felt like to Harry. Sitting in a private wing of the palace, surrounded by aides and advisors, the reality hitting him like a tidal wave. His father had made a public ultimatum, leaving him with a decision that was as personal as it was historical. The public might see a single sentence, a single choice, but behind closed doors, the layers of tension, history, and emotion were unfathomable. This wasn't a casual suggestion or a polite request. This was a challenge, a defining moment, a royal crossroads. The moment the statement hit the news wires, social media erupted. Tweets, Instagram posts, Facebook comments. All exploded with speculation, outrage, support, and disbelief. Hashtags trended globally. News channels scrambled to provide instant analysis. Pundits, celebrities, and political commentators jumped in, each offering their interpretation of what the ultimatum meant. But while the world debated, inside the palace, the atmosphere was different. Heavy, electric, charged with anticipation and dread. Every step, every glance, every whispered conversation carried the weight of history. Palace insiders reported seeing Harry pace the floors, his jaw tight, his mind racing. Advisors tried to mediate, to calm him, to remind him of protocols and the delicate balance of appearances. But protocols were irrelevant at this point. This was personal, a father testing his son, a king asserting authority, a family caught in the glare of global scrutiny. Harry knew that any choice he made would not only define his own life, but could reshape the monarchy itself. The stakes couldn't have been higher. And then there was Meghan. Though absent from the initial announcement, her influence was palpable. Sources say she was in a nearby private suite, closely monitoring the developments, weighing options, and preparing to provide counsel. Her presence, real or symbolic, added another layer of complexity. Every decision Harry considered was filtered through the lens of their partnership. Would he choose reinstatement knowing it might constrain their life together? Or would he choose separation, risking public condemnation, media frenzy, and royal fallout? What's crucial to understand is that Charles's ultimatum was unprecedented. Sure, royal disputes have been reported, and family disagreements have made headlines before. But rarely has a reigning monarch issued such a direct, public challenge to an adult son. In centuries of British history, few moments carry the weight of this one. Charles wasn't just making a demand. He was staking a claim, sending a message that loyalty and duty still mattered above all else. And in doing so, he forced Harry into a position that was both personal and political, a position where every decision has consequences that ripple far beyond the palace walls. Inside the room, the reactions were immediate. The journalists scribbled furiously, cameras clicked, and microphones captured every nuance of Charles's tone. Analysts began parsing the statement line by line, looking for hidden meanings, subtle cues, or any indication of compromise. But the tone of the ultimatum was unmistakable. Charles was resolute. There would be no half measures, no ambiguity. Harry either stepped fully back into the royal fold or stepped away entirely. Yet even as the world reacted, the palace staff scrambled behind the scenes. Secret meetings were convened. Advisors whispered urgently. Legal teams reviewed protocols. Media consultants debated the wording of statements that might follow. And in one quiet office, a small team of aides prepared a document that would outline every potential consequence of Harry's choice. Personal, political, and financial. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. Imagine, for a moment, the psychological pressure on Harry. He's not just a prince. He's a man navigating centuries of tradition, family expectations, and public scrutiny. He's aware that history will remember his decision. Every move will be documented, analyzed, and criticized. Every whisper, every glance, every smile could be dissected as either loyalty or rebellion. And yet, he has to make a choice, now, under conditions that are both intensely private and inescapably public. Sources close to the palace describe Harry's initial reaction as a mixture of disbelief and frustration. He reportedly muttered to aides, trying to process the magnitude of the ultimatum. And then, reportedly, he leaned back, closed his eyes for a moment, and allowed himself to think, really think, about the implications. Reinstatement meant returning to royal duties, a return to scrutiny, and possibly a return to the suffocating constraints of palace life. Separation meant freedom, yes, but also public backlash, family tension, and the permanent loss of certain privileges and connections. Neither choice was easy, and both carried risks that could redefine not just his life, but the monarchy itself. Meanwhile, global attention was at a fever pitch. Television networks interrupted regular programming. Live feeds broadcast analysts debating every angle. Social media exploded with theories, some rational, some absurd. Public figures weighed in. Former royal aides, journalists, and historians dissected every word of Charles's statement. Every moment, every reaction added another layer to the story, turning it into a global spectacle. But here's the thing, the public only saw the surface. Beneath the headlines and the tweets, a storm was brewing. Palace insiders whispered about potential scenarios. Harry choosing reinstatement but setting conditions, Meghan exerting influence behind the scenes, advisors maneuvering to protect the monarchy's image. Every option had consequences, and every decision carried risks that no one could fully predict. This wasn't just drama. This was history in motion. And let's not forget the emotional undertone. Charles, as a father, isn't just a king. He's a man navigating the delicate balance of authority, love, disappointment, and hope. Issuing such an ultimatum wasn't just a political move, it was a deeply personal act. It forced his son to confront the tension between duty and desire, tradition and individuality, loyalty and independence. And for Harry, it was the ultimate test, a test that would leave scars regardless of the choice he made. Now, imagine being an observer, like us, watching this unfold in real time. You feel the tension, the stakes, the emotion. You're caught between curiosity, judgment, and empathy. And yet, you know, as does everyone paying attention, that this is just the beginning. The first wave of shock has passed, but the true storm, the private decisions, the family negotiations, the ripple effects across the monarchy, is only starting to gather force. As the day unfolded, palace insiders noted subtle signs of tension that only those familiar with royal protocol could read. A tightened jaw here, a fleeting glare there, whispered conversations in hallways usually silent at this hour. Every gesture carried weight. Every word was scrutinized. And Harry? He was somewhere between contemplation and calculation, knowing that his next move could change not just his life, but the course of history. And then, just when it seemed the initial shock might settle, a private aide delivered news that added an entirely new layer of complication. There were undisclosed conditions, internal memos, and strategic plans circulating in hushed tones, indicating that the choice wasn't as simple as reinstatement or separation. There were nuances, consequences, and potential consequences within consequences, an intricate web that could entangle Harry in ways the public could never imagine. And yet, despite all this complexity, one thing is clear. Harry now holds a decision in his hands that will echo for generations. A choice that will define him, his relationship with his father, his connection to the monarchy, and his place in history. One decision, made under unprecedented pressure, with the world watching, and with consequences that no one can fully predict. The world only saw the public face of the ultimatum. Headlines flashed across screens. King Charles issues royal ultimatum to Harry. Social media exploded with commentary, speculation, and outrage. But the real story, the one no camera captured, was happening in the quiet, shadowed halls of Buckingham Palace. Behind closed doors, in a room shielded from the press, advisors, and even many royal aides, a conversation was taking place that would define the course of the monarchy for years to come. Harry sat across from his father in a private sitting room, its walls lined with portraits of kings and queens who had long since shaped history. The air was thick with tension, almost tangible, as if the centuries of royal expectation pressed down on everyone in the room. Charles, poised but visibly serious, stared at his son. For a moment, silence reigned. It was the kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of every breath, every shifting movement. Then, finally, Charles spoke. "You have a choice," he said, voice firm but measured, the weight of authority unmistakable. "You either return fully to the responsibilities expected of you as a member of this family, or you step away entirely. There is no middle ground." Harry's jaw tightened. His mind raced, considering the implications of every possible path. The choice sounded simple in theory, but the layers of reality made it anything but. Returning to the royal fold meant public appearances, ceremonial duties, and constant scrutiny. Walking away meant leaving behind centuries of tradition, privilege, and connections, and facing a media storm unlike any he had experienced before. "What do you expect me to do, father?" Harry asked, his voice calm but edged with frustration. "Do you want me to just surrender my independence? Pretend everything is fine?" Charles's eyes flickered, showing a mixture of exasperation and something deeper, pain, perhaps, or disappointment. "It's not about pretending, Harry. It's about responsibility. Family comes before everything else. That is what has kept this monarchy alive for centuries. That is what I expect of you." The tension in the room was nearly unbearable. Every word carried weight, every phrase a potential turning point. Advisors who had been waiting outside the door could feel the intensity seeping through the walls, like a storm pressing against the windows. The conversation wasn't just about duty. It was about loyalty, love, and the delicate balance of personal desire against centuries of expectation. Harry leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "I've already sacrificed so much," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I've stepped away before to protect my family, to create a life for us away from the scrutiny. And now I'm supposed to just come back like nothing happened." Charles's expression softened for a brief moment, revealing the human side of a monarch usually shielded by protocol and tradition. "Harry, I understand more than you think. But you cannot ignore the consequences, both personal and public. Your choices do not exist in isolation. They ripple through the family, the monarchy, and the nation." And then, almost imperceptibly, a new layer of tension emerged. A subtle shift in tone, a flicker of emotion that Harry immediately recognized. This wasn't just about duty. It was about trust. Charles was testing him, gauging his loyalty, his willingness to accept the crown's expectations. And Harry, though he tried to remain calm, felt the full weight of history pressing down. Every choice, every word, every gesture was scrutinized, not just by his father, but by generations of ancestors whose portraits stared silently from the walls. "You want loyalty?" Harry asked, his voice rising slightly. "I've shown loyalty. I've followed protocol. I've endured scrutiny, judgment, and criticism. And yet, I'm here being told I must choose, like a boy again, not a man." Charles leaned forward slightly, his voice unwavering. "This is not a punishment, Harry. It is a responsibility, a duty, one that has been expected of every member of this family, including you. The crown does not operate on convenience or sentiment. It operates on legacy, continuity, and service." The conversation continued, hour after hour, as father and son navigated a labyrinth of emotions, expectations, and strategic considerations. Advisors hovered nearby, occasionally slipping notes under doors or whispering updates, but they were largely silent, aware that any interference could change the course of this delicate negotiation. Every sentence Harry and Charles exchanged felt like it carried the weight of history. Every pause, every glance, every measured word added to the electric tension in the room. At one point, Harry shifted the discussion toward Meghan, whose presence, though physically absent, loomed large in every consideration. Do you expect her to just accept all this too? He asked. She has her own life, her own family. Her choices matter as much as mine. Charles paused, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly. I understand her position, but you must consider the monarchy, Harry. Tradition, expectation, duty. These are bigger than any one individual, bigger than any personal grievance or ambition. They have endured for centuries because they are treated with seriousness, not convenience. It was a statement that cut deep. Harry understood its truth, but also its harshness. He felt the tension of generations pressing down on him. The expectations of his grandfather, his grandmother, his father, and now the eyes of the world. This wasn't just about a single choice. It was about history itself and the consequences of defiance or compliance. And then came the first revelation that truly shocked Harry. Charles leaned back, his tone deliberate, and said, "There are conditions to both choices. Reinstatement is not automatic. There are expectations, oversight, and scrutiny. Separation is not easy. There will be limitations, restrictions, and consequences. Neither path is without sacrifice." Harry's mind raced. The ultimatum was already monumental, but now it was layered with hidden complexities. Every decision had strings attached. Every path was fraught with potential peril. There was no simple answer, no easy resolution. He could see the intricate web of consequence extending far beyond the room they sat in, reaching into every corner of the palace, every aspect of public perception, every facet of family legacy. The discussion continued late into the evening. It was filled with moments of tension, rare flashes of humor, bitter irony, and profound emotional depth. Charles, despite the weight of his authority, occasionally revealed vulnerability. A trace of paternal concern that reminded Harry of the man behind the crown. And Harry, despite his frustration and defiance, could not ignore the truth in his father's words. Choices have consequences, and this choice could shape the future for decades. At one point, a minor detail sparked a small, almost imperceptible breakthrough. Charles referenced historical precedents, moments when royal family members faced similar ultimatums or public scrutiny, and how their decisions shaped history. It was subtle, but Harry recognized the underlying message. The crown operates not just in the present, but across generations. Choices echo beyond individual lives, affecting reputation, legacy, and continuity. And yet, even with this insight, the enormity of the situation remained. Harry knew that whatever he decided, the world would scrutinize him. Every word he spoke publicly afterward, every appearance he made, every interaction with family and media would be seen as evidence of loyalty or rebellion. The pressure was suffocating, and Meghan's presence loomed constantly, a reminder that his choice was not just personal, but intertwined with her life, ambitions, and public perception. As the private conversation reached its climax, advisors whispered warnings, staff prepared for potential statements, and the palace hummed with barely contained tension. Harry's decision, though not yet finalized, had already begun to ripple through the palace. Every gesture, every sigh, every subtle shift in expression carried weight. And then, just as it seemed the conversation might conclude, Charles dropped a line that would haunt Harry for the rest of the evening. "Whatever you decide, remember this. History is watching. Your choice will define not only your life, but the reputation of this family for generations. Choose wisely." Harry's mind reeled. The pressure, the responsibility, the emotional stakes, all compressed into a single moment of decision. And while the world outside continued to speculate, tweet, and debate, Harry knew that nothing would ever be the same. The quiet of the palace hid the storm of consequences already in motion. And as he rose from the chair, a thought struck him that made his pulse quicken. No matter which path he chose, someone would be betrayed, someone would be disappointed, and someone, perhaps even he himself, would be irrevocably changed. Even though Queen Elizabeth had passed, her presence lingered in Buckingham Palace with an almost ghostly authority. Portraits of her gazed down from the walls. Ceremonial protocols she had meticulously enforced still guided the movements of courtiers and advisors. Her influence on the monarchy was immeasurable, a force so pervasive that it shaped the behavior of every living royal, including Charles and Harry. And now, as Charles issued his unprecedented ultimatum to Harry, The weight of her shadow seemed heavier than ever. The very air in the palace felt charged with her expectations, her standards, her unspoken judgments. Harry understood this more than most. He had grown up acutely aware of the weight of the crown, of the expectations passed down through generations. He knew that every choice he made would not just reflect on himself, but also on the legacy of the queen he had loved and, in his own way, revered. And yet, that legacy was a double-edged sword. The queen had maintained an impeccable image of duty, composure, and sacrifice, but she had also wielded her influence quietly, strategically, shaping the monarchy behind the scenes in ways the public rarely saw. Her shadow was a mix of inspiration, expectation, and pressure, and now, in this moment, it bore down on Harry more heavily than ever. Charles, aware of this dynamic, often invoked his mother's legacy in discussions with Harry. It wasn't just a matter of tradition. It was a lesson in survival, in responsibility, in understanding what the crown required. Your grandmother made sacrifices you cannot even imagine, Charles reminded Harry during one private meeting. Her choices ensured stability, continuity, and respect for the institution. You have to think beyond yourself. Harry listened, but the words were a bitter pill. He had always admired his grandmother, yes, but he also recognized the cost. He had grown up witnessing the rigidity of royal life, the scrutiny, and the expectation that personal happiness must often be subordinated to duty. And now, that lesson was being imposed on him in its starkest form. The Queen's influence was more than a memory. It was a standard against which every decision would be measured, and a shadow that no choice could escape. Historians and royal experts note that the Queen's methods were both subtle and formidable. She rarely forced confrontations publicly, yet her presence and expectations shaped family behavior profoundly. Protocols were followed not just out of fear, but out of respect for the precedent she had set over decades. She had mastered the art of influence, shaping outcomes without overtly controlling them. And Harry, whether consciously or not, felt that same invisible hand guiding, pressuring, and judging him now. The Queen's shadow wasn't just a metaphorical force. It had practical consequences. Advisors and staff still operated under her rules and expectations. Decision-making frameworks she had installed remained in effect. Communications, media strategy, ceremonial planning, even palace hierarchy, all were colored by her influence. When Charles issued his ultimatum, he wasn't just speaking as a father. He was speaking as a monarch shaped by the institution his mother had fortified. The Queen's approach to duty, discretion, and loyalty was embedded in every element of this decision, shaping the options available to Harry and the consequences they would carry. For Harry, the weight was suffocating. He had spent years trying to define himself outside the shadow of the monarchy, carving a life with Meghan that balanced public visibility with personal autonomy. Yet now, he faced the stark reality that the institution and the standards set by the Queen herself would not allow him to exist in half measures. The ultimatum was a test, a challenge, a reckoning with the legacy of the monarchy and its expectations of him. It wasn't just about choosing to be part of the monarchy or stepping away. It was about navigating the moral and emotional obligations passed down through generations. To reintegrate fully would mean embracing not just Charles's authority, but the Queen's long-standing ideals. Duty over desire, stability over spontaneity, legacy over personal fulfillment. To separate would mean rejecting those ideals and facing the public consequences of defying centuries of tradition. Every path carried profound weight. Adding complexity to the situation was the delicate nature of Charles's relationship with Harry. Charles, shaped by his mother's reign, understood the necessity of balancing firmness with empathy. He had seen how his mother maintained control while also preserving loyalty, and he tried to replicate that in his conversations with Harry. Yet, the result was tension. Harry often interpreted Charles's attempts at guidance as pressure, criticism, or judgment, and that tension was amplified by the emotional stakes, the global scrutiny, and the knowledge that any misstep could become headline news. In private conversations, Charles often referenced the Queen's philosophy indirectly, drawing on her approach to diplomacy, patience, and long-term strategy. Your grandmother believed in measured action, he reminded Harry. She understood the consequences of every choice, every word, every gesture. You must do the same. But Harry, still wrestling with his desire for independence and personal freedom, struggled to reconcile the lessons of the past with the realities of his present situation. The Queen's shadow also loomed over Meghan's position. Though she was not physically present during Charles's ultimatum, her role in the monarchy's evolving dynamics was undeniable. She had entered the royal family with her own ideas, her own ambitions, and her own perspective on public life. Her approach often clashed with the traditional values upheld by the Queen and Charles, creating friction that now magnified the pressure on Harry. The ultimatum forced him to consider not only his own path, but the implications for Meghan's role, influence, and future. Royal historians point out that moments like this, when the legacy of one monarch intersects with the actions of another, are rare but historically transformative. Decisions made under the shadow of a predecessor can define the course of the monarchy for decades. Harry, fully aware of this, realized that his choice was about more than family or personal happiness. It was about shaping a historical narrative, one that would be dissected, analyzed, and debated for generations. The emotional stakes were equally profound. Charles, as a father, was navigating a delicate line, enforcing authority while expressing care. Harry, as a son and as a man, was balancing personal desires with institutional obligations. Meghan's potential involvement added another layer of emotion. Loyalty, love, and partnership intersected with duty, expectation, and public perception. The weight of these intersecting forces created a tension so dense it could almost be felt physically within the walls of the palace. Meanwhile, staff and advisors navigated the Queen's established protocols as they assisted Charles. Every memo, every briefing, every contingency plan was crafted with her influence in mind. The shadow of her reign dictated not just what could be done, but how it should be done, ensuring that even in her absence, her standards and expectations shaped outcomes. Every conversation, every decision, every reaction was filtered through the lens of her enduring presence. For Harry, the ultimate pressure was the moral and ethical dimension. Rejoining the monarchy fully would honor his grandmother's legacy and preserve the family image, but it would demand personal compromises and subordination to centuries of tradition. Walking away would assert personal freedom, but it could be interpreted as a betrayal of the family, a rejection of the legacy his grandmother had spent her life protecting. Every choice carried moral, emotional, and historical consequences, none of which could be ignored. And yet, even in this shadow, Harry was not without agency. He understood that he could navigate these pressures strategically, balancing duty with personal integrity. He could negotiate conditions, establish boundaries, and craft a path that respected both his family and himself. But doing so required extraordinary skill, courage, and foresight, qualities that would be tested to their limits in the hours and days to come. As the day wore on, the weight of the Queen's shadow became almost palpable. Advisors whispered in hallways, strategists drafted contingency plans, and palace staff moved quietly but purposefully. Every detail mattered. Seating arrangements, timing of announcements, phrasing of statements, public appearances. The legacy of the Queen's reign dictated the rules, whether explicitly or implicitly. And Harry, aware of this, knew that he had to act with precision and care. And yet, just as he began to consider his possible strategies, a private aide delivered news that added a new, unexpected complication. A confidential message revealed internal divisions among senior advisors. Differences in opinion about how Harry should respond, what Charles truly expected, and what the consequences of each choice might be. The situation, already fraught with tension, became even more complex. The shadow of the Queen, far from providing clarity, now highlighted the depth of the uncertainty surrounding Harry's decision. In that moment, Harry understood a simple but profound truth. The Queen's influence was not a comfort. It was a standard, an expectation, and a measure against which he would be judged, both publicly and privately. And as he contemplated the implications, a thought struck him that made the weight of the decision feel almost unbearable. No matter which path he chose, the shadow of history, the legacy of his grandmother, and the expectations of the monarchy would follow him, shaping perception, opinion, and consequence for years to come. While the world focused on King Charles's public ultimatum and Harry's private deliberations, Meghan Markle was quietly absorbing every detail from her own vantage point. Though not physically present when the announcement was made, the Duchess of Sussex felt the weight of the decision as acutely as Harry himself. Her life, her career, her image, and her partnership with Harry were all now entwined in a high-stakes situation that could redefine everything. And Meghan, no stranger to scrutiny, knew that her response, or lack of one, would have profound consequences. The first thing Meghan did after hearing the news was retreat to her private suite, a sanctuary she had carved out in Los Angeles. It was a space far removed from the gaze of cameras, publicists, and royal protocol. The walls were lined with personal mementos, photographs, and carefully chosen objects meant to remind her of her own journey. Before, during, and after her entry into the royal family. For Meghan, this room wasn't just a retreat. It was a laboratory where she could process complex emotions, strategize next steps, and assess the personal and public ramifications of the ultimatum. She sat quietly, phone in hand, reading the endless updates streaming in from news outlets, social media, and confidential royal channels. Every headline amplified the pressure. King Charles issues ultimatum to Prince Harry. Full reinstatement or total separation, one article screamed. The Duke's dilemma, royal loyalty versus personal freedom, another read. Meghan scrolled through live feeds, noting the tone of public sentiment, the speculation, and the polarized opinions. The scrutiny was global, relentless, and unforgiving, and she knew that any public statement from her, or even a subtle action, would instantly be dissected by millions. Meghan's first instinct was to protect Harry. She had been through public controversies before and understood the mechanics of media frenzy. But this ultimatum was unprecedented. It wasn't just a story to manage. It was a defining moment in the history of the monarchy. Every word she considered, every counsel she offered Harry, would carry extraordinary weight. It wasn't enough to be smart or strategic. It had to be flawless, because even a minor misstep could spark a storm that neither she nor Harry could contain. Sources close to Meghan say that she immediately began weighing options. Should she publicly support Harry, reinforcing unity and strength? Or should she adopt a more cautious stance, allowing Harry to act independently while shielding herself from potential fallout? Every scenario had consequences, both personal and public. If she aligned too strongly with Harry, she risked being portrayed as manipulative or controlling, a narrative she had fought against before. If she stayed silent, critics could interpret it as apathy or detachment. Adding to the complexity was Meghan's awareness of internal palace dynamics. She knew that senior aides and advisors would be watching closely, analyzing her every move. Leaks and rumors had already begun circulating, carefully timed to test her reactions and gauge public response. The palace machine was strategic, methodical, and relentless. Meghan understood that inaction could be just as dangerous as a misstep. Timing, phrasing, and even the medium of her response could alter the trajectory of the crisis. Meghan's emotional response was equally layered. On one hand, she was fiercely protective of Harry and their family. On the other, she understood the delicate balance of power, tradition, and optics that the monarchy demanded. Her mind oscillated between strategy and emotion, between instinct and calculation. She considered the historical precedent, the Queen's legacy, and the possible reactions from Charles, other family members, and the public. It was a mental and emotional juggling act of immense complexity. To process all of this, Meghan reportedly held a series of private calls with trusted advisors and confidants. She sought insights not just on strategy, but on emotional resilience. She wanted to ensure that any public action would be consistent, credible, and defensible. Every statement, every gesture, had to reinforce a narrative of strength, integrity, and calculated decision-making. In her mind, there was no room for error. The stakes were too high. And then there was the question of timing. Meghan knew that Harry was facing an immediate decision, one that could not be postponed indefinitely. Yet she also recognized the value of patience, the power of waiting until the right moment to make a move. Public perception, after all, was as much about timing as it was about content. A miscalculated response, released too early or too late, could undermine everything Harry had fought to protect and everything she had worked to build. Her analysis extended to the emotional and relational aspects as well. How would Charles interpret her stance? Would he see her as supportive of Harry, or as an outside influencer meddling in royal affairs? Would the family dynamics be further strained if she spoke publicly or even subtly signaled her opinion? Meghan weighed these factors carefully, understanding that every decision she made would reverberate across private and public spheres. Sources indicate that Meghan also considered the broader narrative. How would the press frame her involvement? How would public opinion shift if she appeared too assertive or too passive? Every aspect of her image, cultivated over years of personal and professional development, was now under scrutiny. The Duchess knew that she had to protect not only her husband but also her identity, her reputation, and the integrity of their partnership. As the hours passed, Meghan reportedly drafted multiple possible approaches. Some were subtle, designed to influence the outcome quietly. Others were bolder, meant to send a clear signal of unity and strength. She weighed the risks and rewards of each, considering both immediate impact and long-term consequences. Every option had trade-offs, and none guaranteed safety or approval. Amid this strategic deliberation, there was also a personal, emotional dimension. Meghan had endured years of public criticism, media attacks, and scrutiny of her every move. The stress of Harry's ultimatum added another layer of pressure. She had to manage her own emotional well-being while guiding her husband through one of the most challenging decisions of his life. It was a balancing act of extraordinary difficulty, managing public perception, family dynamics, and personal integrity all at once. And yet, despite the pressure, Meghan remained resolute. She understood that this was a defining moment, not just for Harry, but for both of them. The way she responded could influence the monarchy, public opinion, and even history. Her choices had to be deliberate, strategic, and emotionally intelligent. She had to be a partner, an advisor, and a protector simultaneously. As Meghan prepared her course of action, sources say she paused to consider one critical question. How could she help Harry make a decision that aligned with both his personal values and his responsibilities? This question drove every decision she made. Every suggestion, every piece of advice, every plan was filtered through this lens. She was not simply reacting. She was actively shaping the context in which Harry would make his historic choice. And just when it seemed that Meghan had formulated a tentative approach, a private communication arrived that changed everything. A confidential message from a senior palace aide hinted at previously unknown consequences tied to Harry's decision. Details about public perception, potential leaks, and strategic maneuvers added an entirely new layer of complexity. Meghan realized immediately that the situation was far more intricate than she had anticipated. The Duchess' mind raced. She knew that timing, wording, and presentation were now more critical than ever. Every action could escalate or mitigate the situation. Every decision carried risks that extended far beyond Harry and herself, touching family, monarchy, and public sentiment. It was no longer a question of personal choice alone. It was a high-stakes negotiation with consequences that could echo across generations. And as the evening wore on, Meghan understood one undeniable truth. Her response would define the next chapter of this unprecedented royal drama. It would influence Harry's choice, shape public perception, and potentially alter the trajectory of the monarchy itself. Every second, every word, every decision mattered. While Harry wrestled with his father's ultimatum and Meghan contemplated her response across the Atlantic, another layer of the crisis was quietly unfolding behind the palace walls. In a dimly lit room, far removed from the ceremonial grandeur of Buckingham's public spaces, a select group of royal advisors convened for what could only be described as an emergency strategy session. This was no ordinary meeting. It was a high-stakes, confidential discussion with the potential to shape not only the immediate decisions of Harry and Charles, but the future of the monarchy itself. The room was tense, filled with senior aides, legal advisors, media strategists, and palace communications experts. Each person understood the stakes. Every word spoken, every note taken, every plan devised could be the difference between containing a potentially explosive situation and letting it spiral into global scandal. The mood was heavy, charged with a mix of fear, anticipation, and urgency. Time was running out, and the world was already watching, even if they didn't yet know the full story. The head of the advisory team opened the meeting with a blunt assessment. The ultimatum has been issued, the public has reacted, and Prince Harry is now under immense pressure. Our role is to ensure the palace maintains control of the narrative while guiding both the king and the duke toward a resolution that protects the institution. The statement set the tone. This meeting was not about personal opinions or comfort. It was about strategy, survival, and preserving centuries of tradition. One advisor, a veteran of palace communications, immediately raised concerns about public perception. "We have to anticipate every reaction," she said. "Social media will explode, journalists will speculate, and leaks will happen. We need a contingency plan for every possible scenario, from total separation to full reinstatement, and everything in between." Her tone was urgent, but her eyes betrayed a hint of dread. She understood that once the story escaped the palace walls, controlling it would be almost impossible. Another advisor, a legal expert specializing in royal protocol and constitutional obligations, chimed in. "Harry's decision is not just personal. It has legal, financial, and constitutional implications. We need to map out each path in detail, what powers, privileges, and responsibilities are affected by each choice, and what can or cannot be negotiated. We cannot afford surprises." His voice carried authority, but even he seemed aware that predicting every variable was nearly impossible. A media strategist leaned forward, her fingers steepled. "Timing is critical. Every announcement, every statement, every photo opportunity must be orchestrated to maximize control. If Harry chooses reinstatement, we need to emphasize unity, loyalty, and tradition. If he chooses separation, we need to frame it as voluntary, dignified, and respectful. Otherwise, the narrative will spiral beyond our control." Her words underscored a truth the public rarely sees. The monarchy is not just a family. It is a global brand, meticulously curated and fiercely protected. As the discussion continued, the advisors began to analyze Harry's behavior and temperament, trying to anticipate his response. One aide noted his history of defiance and independence, citing past actions where he had stepped away from the royal fold to protect his personal life. Another highlighted his recent efforts to establish autonomy while maintaining dignity, emphasizing that any approach would have to balance firmness with sensitivity. "We need to appeal to both his loyalty and his desire for independence," the aide concluded. Failing to do so risks alienating him further. Then came the more sensitive, controversial part of the meeting. Meghan, though not present in the palace, her influence was acknowledged as a major factor. Advisors debated how much weight her opinion might carry in Harry's decision. Should they attempt to engage her discreetly, or consider her influence as an immovable factor in their planning? Some argued that ignoring her would be a mistake. Others feared that overemphasizing her role could backfire, reinforcing narratives of outside manipulation. The tension in the room was palpable. Meghan was not just a participant by association. She was a force that could tip the balance in either direction. As the debate unfolded, one of the senior aides, someone with decades of experience navigating royal crises, raised a chilling question. What if he chooses neither path fully? What if he attempts a compromise that doesn't satisfy the monarchy or the public? A hush fell over the room. The possibility was terrifying. A partial decision could fracture the institution, create media chaos, and undermine both Charles's authority and the monarchy's image. Every advisor understood that a half measure was almost as dangerous as outright defiance. The head advisor leaned back, a deep frown etched on his face. "We need contingency plans for the worst-case scenario," he said. "We need messaging strategies, media responses, legal reviews, and internal communications. Every department must be aligned. Every possibility accounted for." The enormity of the task was clear. They were not merely advising a family. They were navigating a centuries-old institution through one of its most precarious moments. At this point, one junior aide spoke up, her voice trembling slightly, but firm in its urgency. "We also need to consider the public sentiment. We've seen the reaction online, polarized, furious, supportive, critical. If we miscalculate even slightly, the backlash could be severe." We're dealing with a global audience, not just the British public. Her observation was met with nods. In today's media landscape, perception could be just as important as action. The meeting turned toward strategy. Advisors began sketching out detailed plans for each scenario. Reinstatement required careful framing, emphasizing loyalty, honoring the Queen's legacy, and presenting a united family front. Separation required tactful distancing, dignified independence, maintained respect, and a narrative that framed the choice as personal, not rebellious. Each plan involved multiple layers of messaging, timing, and public appearances, all designed to maintain control over a situation spiraling with uncertainty. Then came an unexpected revelation that shifted the room's dynamics. A confidential source had leaked that Harry might already be considering a bold, unanticipated move, a response that could bypass traditional protocols and reshape the crisis entirely. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Advisors realized that the Duke was not merely reacting. He was thinking strategically, perhaps even in ways that could outmaneuver the palace itself. This was no ordinary family dilemma. This was a battle of influence, intelligence, and perception, and the stakes were unprecedented. Senior advisors exchanged tense glances. The room understood the gravity. The situation had escalated beyond planning and control. Harry's choice, Meghan's influence, Charles's authority, and public scrutiny were all converging into a perfect storm. One misstep could have catastrophic consequences, both for the individuals involved and for the monarchy as an institution. In the final moments of the meeting, the advisors consolidated their plans, each department taking responsibility for their area of influence. Communications would coordinate with media outlets, legal would prepare for potential fallout, and senior aides would manage internal family interactions. But even as plans were drafted, a sense of unease lingered. They were preparing for the unknown, responding to a scenario that was unpredictable, volatile, and historically unprecedented. As the meeting adjourned, one advisor muttered under their breath, a grim acknowledgement of reality. No matter what we do, someone is going to be furious, and someone is going to be hurt, and the world will see it all. The words hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. The advisors dispersed, each returning to their post, knowing that the next moves by Harry, Meghan, or Charles could ignite a cascade of events beyond anyone's control. And just when it seemed the crisis could not deepen further, a secure communication arrived on a private line. An encrypted message from a source within the palace itself. The content was brief but explosive, a hint that there were factions forming within the royal staff, each with their own opinion on how Harry should proceed. The implication was clear. Even inside the palace, loyalty was divided, and the choices Harry made could trigger internal conflict as well as public controversy. The room went silent. Advisors stared at the message, the weight of its meaning pressing down like a physical force. This was no longer just a family dilemma or a media challenge. It was a multidimensional crisis, with political, personal, and institutional consequences. Every calculation, every plan, every assumption was now subject to uncertainty. As soon as news of King Charles's ultimatum hit the public sphere, the media erupted like a storm no one could contain. Headlines screamed across newspapers, websites, and social media feeds worldwide. Prince Harry faces royal choice. Return or sever ties. Monarchy in crisis as King Charles issues ultimatum. The Duke of Sussex's life hangs in balance. The immediacy of the announcement sent reporters scrambling, pundits speculating, and millions of followers refreshing feeds for updates. It was the kind of story that demanded attention, not just because of the celebrity factor, but because it carried the weight of history, tradition, and unprecedented family drama. Inside newsrooms, chaos reigned. Editors convened emergency meetings, strategists plotted breaking news timelines, and journalists frantically sought insiders willing to leak details. Every network understood the potential for explosive engagement. This was a story that combined royalty, scandal, family conflict, and high-stakes decision-making. Social media algorithms amplified the frenzy, spreading snippets, rumors, and expert analyses across the globe in seconds. It was no longer just a royal story. It had become a media event, the kind that would dominate headlines for days, if not weeks. The intensity of coverage was unprecedented. Analysts debated the implications of Harry's choice from multiple angles: constitutional, personal, and psychological. Royal biographers highlighted historical parallels, referencing past instances where monarchs issued ultimatums to heirs or family members. Pundits dissected the potential consequences for Charles, Harry, Meghan, and even the wider public perception of the monarchy. Every comment, every tweet, and every broadcast added another layer to an already complex situation. In the UK, tabloids were particularly voracious. Front pages displayed bold headlines, often accompanied by speculative photographs or artistic renderings, dramatizing the situation. Editorials questioned loyalty, responsibility, and the pressures of royal life. They debated whether Harry's independence could coexist with tradition and whether Meghan's influence complicated matters further. In one dramatic headline, a popular tabloid speculated, "Royal rift erupts. Will Harry break with family forever?" The language was designed to provoke emotion, stoke curiosity, and generate clicks. Across the Atlantic, American media approached the story with a different lens. Networks emphasized the personal drama, the celebrity factor, and the transatlantic implications of Meghan and Harry's decisions. Analysts compared the Sussexes' situation to high-profile celebrity divorces or power struggles in major corporations, framing the ultimatum as both personal and institutional. The combination of royal authority, celebrity culture, and global attention created a feedback loop. The more coverage there was, the more public curiosity grew, which in turn demanded even more coverage. Social media platforms became battlegrounds. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and X, formerly known as Twitter, exploded with speculation, memes, and emotional reactions. Fans and critics alike debated Harry's options, Meghan's potential influence, and Charles's motives. Some argued that the ultimatum was fair, emphasizing loyalty and duty. Others condemned it as unnecessarily harsh, framing Harry as a victim of rigid tradition. Influencers and commentators posted viral content dissecting every aspect, from body language in public appearances to subtle cues in official statements. Algorithms amplified controversy, ensuring that the story remained at the forefront of global attention. Meanwhile, the palace communications team scrambled to manage the narrative. Every official statement, press release, and social media post was carefully calibrated to convey control, stability, and respect for privacy. Though controlling the narrative in a media storm of this magnitude was nearly impossible. The palace faced a delicate balancing act. They needed to communicate authority and seriousness, while also mitigating potential public backlash and preserving the dignity of both Charles and Harry. Every word had to be deliberate, every pause measured. Every statement scrutinized for unintended implications. Journalists working the royal beat went into overdrive. Sources whispered confidential details, leaks were analyzed, and inside information became the currency of engagement. Reporters pieced together timelines of Harry's private meetings with Charles, Meghan's actions in Los Angeles, and the behind-the-scenes advisory meetings that were now beginning to leak. Every revelation, confirmed or speculative, fueled further coverage, ensuring that the story remained a constant topic of conversation. The media frenzy also had a psychological impact on Harry and Meghan. Every rumor, headline, and viral post became an emotional pressure point. Harry, already grappling with the ultimatum, had to contend with an unprecedented level of public scrutiny. Meghan, strategically considering her response, now had to navigate not just palace dynamics, but the unpredictable and often volatile world of global media. The pressure was relentless, and every decision they made carried the potential to be twisted, misinterpreted, or sensationalized. Public reaction added another layer of complexity. Fans expressed loyalty to Harry and Meghan, emphasizing empathy for the couple and admiration for their attempts to balance personal life with royal obligations. Critics, however, accused Harry of rebellion, Meghan of manipulation, and Charles of rigidity. Social media polls, trending hashtags, and viral opinion pieces created an ongoing, unrelenting conversation that influenced perception in real time. Public sentiment was fluid, volatile, and sometimes contradictory, reflecting the polarized nature of modern media consumption. Amid the chaos, one journalist broke a potentially game-changing story. Anonymous insiders claimed that Harry's decision could influence the line of succession and the allocation of royal duties, creating a ripple effect across the monarchy. The revelation sent shockwaves through both media and public circles. Analysts scrambled to interpret the implications, historians weighed in with context, and social media exploded with speculation. Suddenly, the ultimatum was no longer a private matter. It had become a historic event with global ramifications. As the hours passed, the media landscape became increasingly fragmented. Traditional news outlets, online tabloids, social media influencers, and amateur bloggers all contributed to an environment where facts, speculation, and opinion blurred together. Harry and Meghan's every move, or perceived move, was analyzed, dissected, and amplified. The pressure to respond, react, and control perception was immense. Any delay or misstep could escalate the situation, feeding the cycle of global media frenzy. The palace was acutely aware of the stakes. Advisors drafted statements, prepped